Hello, this is Psycho, and today we are going to talk about Bioshock. We are going to dive deep into Heart of Rapture, which isn't just a fictional city in a video game, but also serves as a powerful social and philosophical critique. So first things first, we are going to talk about the start in this game, that it's Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was a Russian little girl born in 1905 in St. Petersburg. She was a novelist, a philosopher, and best known for almost creating objectivism. She was born in an educated Jewish family. Her father, Zinovy Rosenbaum, owned several small pharmacies, and her mother, Anna Kaplan, was a homemaker who encouraged Ayn, early interested in literature and theater. She saw the Bolsheviks seize power in 1917. So their family's pharmacies were nationalized and her father lost everything. The confiscation of her family's livelihood and the general collapse of individual enterprise under the new regime left a deep scar for her. She watched all the business vanish. Friends' parents been arrested for being bourgeois because in the Soviet Revolution they took the private property. At 21, he left Russia. At the time, the Bolshevik regime had already nationalized all her father's pharmacies, seized her family's property, and imposed some restrictions on freedom of expression. Something different from the political view of the Soviet nation that still happens today. They are labeled not by a psychiatrist, but it's true, that diagnosed are political. I'm not here, Michel Foucault, to say it, but we know the political view of a diagnose. We know the diagnose is a way of control. This started earliest 1006. Soviet psychiatrists labeling genuine political dissident as a form of mental illness. Most famous, sluggish or oligophrenic schizophrenia. So if you think different from the political view of the Soviet nation, you are going to be a crazy person. That still happens today. They are labeled not by a psychiatrist, but it's true, that diagnosed are political. Determined to escape because of the ideological and economical problems, she had a visa to travel to United States. Formerly St. Petersburg. False papers for a brief trip to Crimea marked her first taste of relative freedom. She sailed to Paris, went on a ship to New York City, and she changed her name from Alicia Rosenbaum to Ayn Rand. And she even made a whole philosophy about this whole trip. So now that we understood a little bit of her, we can talk about the objectivism itself. A whole philosophy. The metaphysics and the epistemology. She claimed that reality exists independent of consciousness. That means that there is an objective reality. So the object doesn't need me to exist to interpret the object. It's there. The only way to know an object is through the observation and logic. On the other hand, the moral purpose of the objectivism is pursuit of one's own happiness. And this is a rational self-interest. Nowadays, we don't think about rational or emotional thinking, that it's completely separated. We have to understand that this was the Cold War, so the world was really polarized. Thinks that a political system should recognize and protect particularly property and allow free markets or coercion. Rand argued that the only legitimate government is one limited to protecting citizens from forced fraud or breach of contract. And she even talked about art. She thinks art should celebrate life and individual heroism. In her own novels, she crafted larger-than-life protagonists who embodied her philosophical ideals. I had to understand that she made lots of work to be there, to create this whole system of beliefs. Only that, the Soviet Union, the art was around the revolution. Know about the person, know about one story. The important thing was the collective and the unit force pursuing the common good. In the art, in the literature, and there are many nowadays, many argues about objectivism, because one treats concept formation as a poorly cognitive act, and that left behind that words and meanings and inherit through a communal linguistic system. We think, we talk, we communicate with others in something that Ronald Barthes talk about. We don't choose the language that we start learning. It's the cultural, the place, the family we are in, the language that we speak and think. The grammar rules are not invented every time by every individual, because if not, we are not going to have the ability to communicate with each other. If everyone is talking with their own grammar rules and using their own concept use criteria, we are going to speak in different language every person, and that it's really difficult to create anything. So another thing that the individual logic matters, it's how children internalize concepts through socialization, how the academic consensus arises through critique, debate, and institutional texts. We are not merely constrained of knowledge. Sometimes objectivism, orthodox random view, think that institutions restrict individual freedom, but institutions also, such as family, school, university, professional associations, nations, they teach our foundational concepts, math, science, ethics, and also standardized methodologies that allow to accumulate progress. For example, peer review in medicine. Sometimes the institution have power inside. Every relationship has power, and it's a force of taking it. And the institutions can make that, because the institutions create meaning, and that is what affects what is accepted as a fact. So Ayn Rand's influence on Rapture is explicit from both narrative design and character construction. Ken Levine chose the name Andrew Ryan as a near anagram of Ayn Rand. In an interview, Levine remarked, "If you dig into the audio logs, Ryan was born in Russia, much like Ayn Rand. He was a middle class, much as Ayn Rand, and when the Bolshevik Revolution happened, his family business was destroyed, again, as Ayn Rand." By situating Andrew Ryan as a Russian emigre who flees state control to build an utopia, Levine directly parallels Ayn Rand's biography with the genesis of Rapture, evidencing how personal trauma fueled Rand's stated individualism. And that's what I was talking before, right? How ironic your own experience construct your beliefs, and her beliefs are objective. So what is the core tenets of Rand's objectivism? Unfettered capitalism, rational self-interests, and also disdain for altruism. Levine has acknowledged, reading The Fountainhead during Bioshock's early development, drawing on celebration of reason-driven individuals who refuse to compromise their visions. So Andrew Ryan, dictatum of "a man chooses, a slave obeys," is an echo of argument in Atlas Shrugged.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture.
Act for the common good amount to moral coercion. And again, we were talking about how institutions construct the meaning of the words, the meaning of concepts, and common good is a concept that is also made. But we can make another ones. So Andrew Ryan, celebrating individual genius, pledging to eliminate government interference and promising infinite scientific process, referencing Rand's own polemic against collectivism Soviet structures. And even Ken Levine talks about this. He thinks that it's not a direct attack against the objectivism, but rather a fair look at humanity. Because we can't make the ideas to become true. We can't fit the ideas to make the reality. Also, if the reality is there, we can make it. So, Rapture collapse dramatize how unchecked rational selfishness devolves into social decay. Splicers, mutations, and exploitations of Little Sister are direct consequences of unfiltered genetic experimentation.
No! Stay away from her, or it is you who will be shot next.
Easy now, Doctor. He's just looking for a wee bit of Adam. Just enough to get by.
I'll not have him hurt my little ones.
It's okay, lad. That's not a child. Not anymore, it ain't. Dr. Tenenbaum saw to that.
Bitte do not hurt her. Have you no heart?
Aye, that's a pretty sermon coming from the ghoul who cooked up them creatures in the first place. Took fine little girls and turned them into that, didn't you? Listen to me, boyo. You won't survive without the Adam those things are carrying. Are you prepared to trade your life, the lives of my wife and child, for Tenenbaum's Frankenstein?
Here! There is another way. Use this. Free them from their torment. I will make it to be worth your while. Somehow.
Symbolizing a scientific progress divorced from ethics, Levine described the spectacle of Rapture's decay as a deliberate subversion by showing how society founded on right principles can be quite ludicrous, and discard the argument that pure objectivism, when stripped up of moral constraints, produces dystopia rather than utopia.
No, no! Thank you. Thank you.
The path of the righteous is not always easy, yes. The reward will become clear in time. Be patient.
Time for a nap, sweetie.
Tenenbaum's playing you for a sap. Those things may look like wee little girls, but looks don't make it so.
And again, here we are talking about not only the objectivism and how thinking that some facts are part of the reality, because who is making those facts? Who is interpreting? Who is using that word? The language that we use define the concepts that we can make. For example, in Chinese or in languages that they don't have an alphabet, and they have kanjis. It's a different way of thinking to structure the grammar. So we can think about a chair, sisha, stool, or even concepts, there are more abstracts like freedom, happiness. So in here, Andrew Ryan's logs celebrate every man selling his own labor for his own betterment. But this is true because what we see and what Rapture tries to show us is that without any regulation, wealth concentrates in the hands of few. Frank Fontaine rise to power, Fontaine futuristic monopolization of Adam Productions, amplified market failure Rand didn't not anticipate. There are people that says that monopolization is a good thing because it's the most efficient in the market, so it's desired for people. When you're a baby, you can't decide, and when you are drugged and you're a splisser that can't think, you're really making decisions. That's what you decide. But Levine makes another point, that it's how even productive elites can abuse freedom with no checks on power exist. This divergence from Rand's theory emphasizes Levine's belief that it's not enough to celebrate scientific breakthroughs. You also have to ask who pays the price when those breakthroughs spirals into chaos.
Of course, the fact that you were genetically conditioned to bark like a cocker spaniel when I said, would you kindly, might have had something to do with it, but still, as soon as that machine finishes processing the genetic key you just fished off Ryan, I'm gonna run Rapture tits to toes. You better, pal. You know what they say. Never mix business with friendship. Thanks for everything, kid. Don't forget to say hi to Ryan for me.
Finally, Levine's narrative frequently returns to Rand's personal history to critique the myth of absolutely autonomy. But let's talk about another character in Rapture, about Tenenbaum's backstory, in particular her time in Auschwitz. Levine tried to introduce Tenenbaum, a character like Andrew Ryan was driven by an unflinching faith in science, but whose experience would illustrate science potential for horror when divorced from empathy with others. So according to Levine, Tenenbaum's family, like Ryan, suffered under Herman Jewish parents were rounded up and slaughtered by the Nazis. Believing that her singular devotion to biblical rigor will explain why she could both survive Mengele's camps and later conduct experiments without moral hesitation, at least initially. Her father's roots were German, and their relative prosperity before the war positioned them as a target once the Nazis occupied the region. Levine even said that she grew up in Belarus and her father was German and slaughtered by the Nazis. But Tenenbaum's distinctive aptitude, her uncanny facility for math, genetics, and pattern recognitions brought her to attention of SS physicians. She was deported to Auschwitz in late 1942. An extraordinary scientific mind, so Nazis doctored and marked her for their illicit medical experiment under Joseph Mengel's supervision. Was to know she could dissociate emotionally from suffer after all that she went through. So that can explain her experiments at the beginning. When Hannah Arendt talks about the reality of evil, she talks about how that evil is not this bad one character only trait. This evil embodies in a person. It's not like that. It's people following orders for beliefs they think they are good. All the mass killings, all the horrors were for a reason, and the people start following. It was a power structure in the concentration camps. Tenenbaum turned from a victim to a collaborator. After correcting Mengele's protocol, Tenenbaum quickly moved from forced subject to willing collaboration. So Levine explains that once deemed valuable, she was offered a prime choice. Help them maximize yield or die. As a result, she began assisting with the same genetic procedures that had once threatened her own life, transplanting organs, injecting psychoactive agents, all under compulsion and academic curiosity. This is not a freely choose from Tenenbaum too, because she was kind of forced, but she continued. This is a whole problem for her, because if she don't do that, she will die. And this might be extreme, but this happens so many times. For example, let's talk about the Nazi structure. If you reject to do what they say, you might be seen as an outsider. And where are you going to work? Where are you going to eat? We are a community. And being left over is something that can take your life. Because life is not just eating, sleeping, and basic needs. We also live in a community. We need our symbolic structures to live. But there is a big difference between Andrew Ryan philosophy and Tenenbaum. We have to remember that she herself experienced Auschwitz experience. So this exposed to the inherent hypocrisy when she chooses to entail torturing innocents. Andrew Ryan, it's more complicated because he is not making a revolution itself, and he's not making the monopolies or the wealth being concentrated. This is something that happened if you let people do what they want. And there is a beautiful quote that Ken Levine said, that it's Tenenbaum show us the hardest equation. It's not a genomic sequence, it's deciding if another life is worth saving. And we can take this to our own lives, because we have to choose all the time who is worth living and who isn't, who is worth having food without toxins, who have specific knowledge, resources to live a better life, who has a space, who can be cured, treated in illness, and who is going to die. Because this is also a decisions that we make, because we fear that we are taking a decision too. But not less important, I think it's worth highlighting that Bioshock also engaged the player, so us, in complicity in this injustice. Because in these flooded corridors, choosing whereas to harvest or rescue the little sister, it becomes an moral litmus test. Finally, harvest, yell, imitate power boost, and rails fewer immediate rewards, but hints at prestige of humanity. This mechanic forces us to face our own short-term desires versus long-term ethical considerations. And we again can think about our real life, because we have to do it all the time. We have to think about our short-term desires versus long-term ethical considerations. In my country, for example, we have soy. The soy, it's easy to sell, it's easy to grow, but also it saturates the land, causing floods. Those floods destroy houses, those flood many people's lives, because the land can absorb the water. The infrastructure that we have, it's not enough. We as a nation, we have to think if we want short-term progress, immediate cash flow. That is not for everyone, of course, it's just for the people that own the lands, but in a way it turns into the nation. Or we can have and think about an ethical decision of all living. So that is also a political decision. That is also a decision whereas these people have to live or these other people have to live. Because if you are an owner of the land of soy, you can choose to live in another country. So in sum, Bioshock warns us against the seductive yet dangerous lure of pure individualism and unbridled technological advancement. And this is not again technological advancement. We have to understand that too. We have to understand that when the comparison is with Mengele, it's okay, that's wrong. But when the comparison is to other countries, to all the technological advancement, it's correct. So through Raptures Reckless, it lies bare how philosophical purity can become social, can become a dystopia when divorced from reality. Because that's what it is. If we want to make this code to fit into the reality, if we want to think the ideals in a Platonic way, as Plato once says, the ideals are on heaven, but we live here and we can't fit those to make us because we are alive. So this was my analysis of Bioshock Rapture. Hope you like it and tell me what you think when you play it. And if you didn't play it, I really invite you to play it because it's a beautiful game. I really like it, I really enjoy it. I was 14 and that game introduced me to bioethics. As you might know, I'm a psychologist and I love bioethics. But yeah, see you next time. This is Psycho Miki.